So for those of you who don't know, Henry Kissinger was a security advisor to the US government through many, many different presidents. He had official roles at certain times. At other times, he was just a guy who would meet with people with power and would kind of use that to influence things. But he has many crimes to his name. He extended the Vietnam War. He gave the word that led to the carpet bombing of Cambodia, which was during the Vietnam War, with the idea that it was going to break down supply lines for the Viet Cong, but the reality was that they just carpet bombed the entire country and killed huge amounts of people. He did have a Nobel Peace Prize, which apparently even he thought was weird. So he was involved in negotiating the ceasefire, and he and his opposite number that he arranged the ceasefire with were both given the Nobel Prize, and the other person turned it down. Apparently even Kissinger felt awkward about the fact that he'd been given a Nobel Prize.
Margaret Brennan looks at his complicated legacy.
Complicated. I think, so I tweeted earlier that when people describe Henry Kissinger as complicated, what they mean is that he did horrific things, but he was on our side. You know, our side. He did war crimes, but he did war crimes which furthered US foreign policy at the time. So I've recently been reading the John le Carré novels, which, for those of you that don't know, are novels about spies in the Cold War, the most famous of which is Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. But one of the abiding kind of things that you take away from it is this sense of the Cold War being not honourable in any real way. In fact, of the Cold War being kind of war for the sake of war, and in many ways no one really believing in any of the ideals that get expressed about it. And those books were being published in the 60s. And it's been really fascinating reading those with this idea of course, we look back on the Cold War now and we recognise that America in particular, but also its allies, did horrific things in the name of taming communism, and also in much of the global south, just democratic socialism and social democracy even. It's being sold as this big clash between America and Russia, and between capitalism and communism, and actually no one really believed that stuff at the time either. By the metric of this so far, he just did peace talks. He was a peace talk guy, which I'm not sure is quite the full picture, but maybe we'll get to that.
Kissinger also spearheaded highly controversial policies, including the brutal bombing of Cambodia.
I'm not sure controversial policy quite covers carpet bombing. The one that always gets me is that he was also like an investor in Theranos. I don't know if we know how much money that he put in. Oh, here we go. So apparently he's worth somewhere between $10 million and $50 million, or was worth, sorry. He put $3 million into Theranos. This is the sort of weird internet fact which pops up occasionally of the fact that Rosa Parks died after Shrek came out, which is one of these little factoids that pops up occasionally of it doesn't feel like Rosa Parks should have been able to go to the cinema and watch the film Shrek. Like, they feel like two very different worlds. And Henry Kissinger, only just of having died, but also having invested in Theranos, similarly feels like two very different worlds. Aiden47 says, did you watch it? I don't know. Could have, is very possible.
City of Texas at Austin. He also wrote the biography, Henry Kissinger and the American Century. Jeremy, thanks so much for joining us.
This guy's smiling with the smile of a guy who's like, today's news means I'm going to have sold a lot of books. He's like, yes, this is my day. Just the smile on his face. Because I think even if he thinks Henry Kissinger is great, he's just like, my time has come. Ever since I did all that lengthy research, I've been waiting for this day.
We talk about realpolitik. We talk about détente. But not a lot gets said about these.
So realpolitik is the idea that, can we find like a good like definition? Yeah, so it's this idea that, sorry, I was finding the real definition is a system of politics or principles based on practical rather than moral or ideological considerations. So his thing was that although politicians and countries, etc., like to make out that they are making decisions based on like that they love the free market, or that they love communism, or that they love the monarchy or whatever, actually when push comes to shove, more practical and maybe power oriented motivations come into play, rather than necessarily the idea of like the greater good, more the idea of what is achievable and practical in this moment. And if that means we have to put aside some of these lofty ideals that we suggest we have, that's okay. And then détente, which was the period of kind of cooling off between the US and the Soviet Union, where sort of some diplomatic relations were restored. What do you think Kissinger thought of Brexit? Do you reckon he had any thoughts? Oh, so he was a Brexit guy because Brexit would bring Britain closer to the fold of the US. Wait, didn't Rolling Stone do like a really funny headline on their... Yeah, so they've not mentioned here, but Rolling Stone did headline their obituary, Henry Kissinger, war criminal beloved by America's ruling class, finally dies. So this is Rolling Stone's obituary for Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger died on Wednesday at his home in Connecticut. His consulting firm said in a statement, the notorious war criminal was 100. Consulting firm in and of itself, I think being a war criminal is one thing, but also having a consulting firm, just as bad. Measuring purely by confirmed kills, the worst mass murderer ever executed by the United States was the white supremacist terrorist Timothy McVeigh. I also discovered that recently there was a guy called Terry Nichols involved in the Oklahoma bombing, which feels like my Wario. The Yale University historian Greg Grandin, author of the biography Kissinger's Shadow, estimates that Kissinger's actions from 1969 through 1976 meant the end of between 3 and 4 million people. That's savage. Literally just sat in front of a big... I wonder what that does to your brain, having so many people just being like, yeah, mate, you're a war criminal.